welcome to everyone who's joining in on this week's session. I was about to say this week's session of disruptive technologies, but this weekend we're doing something different and we are having a new segment titled African Digital Ecosystems. So before we move on, I just want to tell everyone to subscribe, like, comment, engage so that we keep the conversation going. My guest is having a bit of a technical challenge, but he's going to be joining us soon. So, um, just before we start, I'd just like to ask anyone in the comments, like, when we talk about African digital ecosystems, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? Just for anyone in the comments as we wait for the guest. Okay, so nothing yet, but luckily my guest is here, so I'm just gonna add him to the stage.
So sorry, I'm late. Am I so late?
You're late by 2 minutes.
Okay. So sorry about that.
Yeah,
Um,
so I was just doing a brief question, like asking everyone who's joined in to say when they hear of African digital ecosystems, what's the first thing that comes to their mind? And so far I have no response. So
oh.
I think yeah, we could just get it moving.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said at the beginning, I've been doing disruptive technologies, a Malayan perspective, but now I'm introducing this new segment, just trying to keep things different. And I think talking about ecosystems is something that is very important because the tech innovations that we've been talking about and discussing do not exist without these ecosystems. There are many players that are involved when it comes to creating these innovations. So I'm just gonna give it over to you, Gerald, to introduce yourself. I know I made a post. I kind of talked about a brief background, like your professional background, but I would like to just give it over to you to give us a more detailed version of what have you been up to, how did you get here, what are you up to now, and yeah, where are you going? So over to you, Gerald.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Much appreciated. About myself, right? I will narrow down the question to especially my career in tech, how I got into tech, and my journey so far, and like you mentioned, where I'm headed. Yeah, so I basically started my journey started in 2015 slash 2016. I started off as a founder where I launched my first tech company at the time called iFix NG. iFix and then NG for Nigeria, right? So kicked off in Nigeria, and the easiest way to put it would be artisans, or rather Uber for artisans, right? So if you're trying to hire a plumber, if you're trying to hire an electrician, you need some fixing done in your home, in the office, you can go online and you can hire someone, so that's where the name came from, iFix, right? And then so we had artisans on the platforms, we had handymen on the platforms as well, and then people could hire. But we quickly realized that the time was too early, especially in Africa, because we are very big on trust as a society. We seem to thrive more with referrals as opposed to going online, because you're talking about your house, your intimate space. So you wouldn't want to go online and just find some random person to come into your home and do some quick fixes, right? So we experienced some pushback, and we had to pivot, right? So we pivoted then at the time to another company called Packet. And this time around, we decided to focus on vehicle care, right? So Packet was a vehicle care company offering car detailing, first level repairs, touches, and all of that. We had both physical locations, and then we had an online platform where people could pay, book for services, get priority service find the closest location to them and get services for their vehicles, right? So that is what we were doing, and that experienced significant success, and eventually, now this was 2018, right? So launched iFix in 2016, did it for like 2 years, and then we pivoted in 2018 to Packet, and then 3 years after, in 2021, we got acquired by a much bigger company in Nigeria. Yes, so we got acquired, and then I went on to work for that company for a while, just to help with transition, and also support in some of the works that the company was doing. I was the vice president for business development at this new company, right? So it's what some people will call an acqui-hire, an acquisition, and then myself and my team were also retained in the new company. And then so I did that for a couple months, and then I left to take a break. A lot of people downplay how difficult it is to build, right? But just to keep it very simple, it's very difficult, right? The burnout, the sleepless nights, it goes very crazy. So I decided to take some months off, when I left this new company, just to try and rest and recover a bit from the experiences from building, because building is intense, building is crazy. And then after that, I ran into the founder of BlackOps, right? So BlackOps is a community for tech operators, right? A lot of people do not know. It's a jargon. It's a tech jargon in our ecosystem, right? And basically, what it means is, when you refer to a tech operator, you're oftentimes referring to all the non-technical roles within the tech ecosystem, right? So like those in sales, those in business development, those in finance, those in human resource, all of those are referred to as operators. So it's an umbrella word for anyone who is not an engineer, a product designer, a product person. You are yeah, you are behind the scene helping make things happen, right? So yeah, I joined BlackOps, a wonderful community for operators. And by the way, shameless plug: if you're an operator in Malawi, please come join BlackOps. we're trying we're trying to spread membership across Africa, right? So I guess you can provide more information later. And but Black Ops is not a job. Black Ops is a community, people of like minds coming together. So I still needed to do something. And then so while I was at Black Ops, I also joined a startup called Anchor. It's a YC company, and basically focused on something called banking as a service, right? Providing APIs for companies that are looking to embed financial products, right? So I'll give you an example. You know how Uber, you can top up your wallet, right? You can add your card to Uber. Exactly. So that functionality is something that a company like Anchor would offer to an Uber to enable them be able to receive payment, right? So yes, so I did that exactly. So I did that for a while, worked with Anchor for about a year and a couple months as head of go to market. And while I was doing that, I realized that we don't have a lot of information, because at the point we were having conversations around scaling outside Nigeria, trying other markets. You know how in Africa, especially for tech, we have something called the Big Four, which are South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya. These are like, and Egypt in North Africa. These are like big. These are the big markets in tech, right? So, but away from the Big Four, if you are considering a place like Malawi, for example, we don't have a lot of information. If I go online and I type tech in, there won't be a lot of information about what's happening there. Same thing, countries closer to Nigeria, like Benin Republic, we don't have a lot of information around what's happening, right? So I decided to, start a hobby, sort of, where in my spare time I can go to these countries and not just go, right? Because I love to connect with people, but away from the connection, I thought about also creating content in the form of documentaries, so that people can see what is happening in these countries. People like we sometimes you can read, but watching brings it more to life, right? If I can watch and experience it, it's more interesting that way. So it's what started as a hobby and as a pet project. quickly took off, right? People saw the Benin Republic video. That was my first documentary. Where if you go on my YouTube, search Gerald Black, you see tech in Benin Republic, right? So I went to Benin Republic and I shot the documentary about their tech ecosystem, and it quickly took off. People loved it, and then I started
Mm.
getting invited. I got invited to Uganda. I got invited to Tunisia. I made a documentary in Tunisia. It's going to be out sometime next month. And
Wow.
and I've been getting a lot of invitations after that. Right? It's just like people have been waiting for something like this. Like come shoot a documentary. We want people to
Okay.
learn about our ecosystem. And
Yes.
and then yeah, so they invite me, all expense paid, just come show up, shoot the documentary. They support financially as well, and I come and I make this documentary and I put it out there, and people get to learn about that ecosystem. Investors get to see some
Mm.
of the amazing startups. People just generally get to learn new things about what's happening, and at the end of the day everyone is happy, right? I get to meet new people, which I love to do. People get to learn about this new ecosystem, right? So right now, I was considering, before now, I was considering, like going back into working, right? Like I mentioned,
Mhm.
prior to now, I was working, and then I took a break, and I started this hobby. And then
Yeah.
before this took off, I was considering going back into working, but then I realized that people love this thing and they're willing to support it. So right now I'm
Yeah.
reconsidering, should I keep doing what I'm doing
Doing
as
this.
opposed
Yeah.
to, yeah, so that's basically where I'm at. I've given you the journey. Yeah, so
Yeah. I mean, when you think about reconsidering, I think it's a sign. When I approached you to ask you to do this, and we talk about Malawi and the tech ecosystem and everything, I think it's a sign that you're on the right path. And I did
yeah,
see a Tunisia video. I really wouldn't have thought of Tunisia as like
I
a
know, right?
destination
I
when it
know.
comes to tech
Yeah, that's the
until I
trailer.
saw a video. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's the
it's the
trailer. The,
trailer.
the, the main video is not out yet. It's going to be out sometime
Okay.
next month. Yeah.
Yeah, but I really loved it. And I mean, I had some questions to ask,
Okay.
considering how it was for you to pivot from initially doing computer science to where you are now, and like how it is to have been a founder and having a business that was acquired. So I think you have kind of tackled that in your explanation. I also wanted to ask you what the process was like. So you have answered that as well. But the one thing that really caught my attention when it came to your profile was the fact that your business was acquired, which is really not something that we have really seen when we're talking about the tech landscape in Malawi. So, I mean, just I really just wanted you to shed a bit more light on exactly what it is to like have a business, to create that, to then have it acquired, like the process, like were you vetted first, and the company that acquired you, are they still using the your company the way, like your tool, the way it was initially designed? Because I mean, here in Malawi we have a company as well that also has some artisans on there. If the people from Malawi who are watching,
Right.
if you know Alonda, they have artisans as well, just that they have kind of included many things in their product. So they have taxi drivers, they have like emergency
Oh,
services on there,
interesting.
they have artisans, they have a lot of things just on the one application. But I mean, you really did kind of tackle the issue that having an artisan based off of an app is something that is kind of hard, because I also understand that even here in Malawi, most of these people really just come through word of mouth. So
Mm,
if your neighbor had like a plumbing issue and they ask you and you ask them, and pretty much that's how it works. So maybe kind of navigating how to use apps now, how to trust an app, how to trust app reviews and people to get that, and like it's kind of a process. So anyway, just a little bit more on that. So like the company that acquired you, like are they still using your product the same way that it was initially, or they made some changes, or yeah, just how did the process go and how's it going?
yeah. So before let me provide context, right? Before the acquisition, we used to provide vehicle care services, like I mentioned, right? And then the company that acquired us, CAS 45, it's a spin-off of CAS 45, but CAS 45 itself is a platform for buying and selling vehicles, right? So people come on the platform, they sell vehicles, people buy vehicles, and
Mm,
before the conversation around acquisition, we used to be a vendor of CAS 45, right? So because they buy used cars, and they also
mm,
sell used cars, pre-owned vehicles. And then so when they make these purchases, they come to us and they say, oh, okay, you guys should help us touch up these vehicles before they put it in the showroom, right? So we had that
mm,
arrangement where we were a vendor providing vehicle care services to CAS 45, right? So when they buy
mm,
these pre-owned vehicles, they bring it to us. We do like that first touch up, and then they go sell
mm,
it and all, right. So we had that relationship. Now it got to a time where there was to be a spin-off of CAS 45 called Fix It 45, like the
mm,
name, right? Like the name rightly depicts. It's vehicle after sales services, right? So they
okay.
were going
Mm,
to provide vehicle care services, repairs, and a whole lot more than what we were doing. Refurbishment, repair
mm,
financing, and so many other things, right? So it made a lot of sense for them to acquire us because at that time we had a very large customer base. We
mm,
had over 11,000 customers. We had, we had a good customer database at that time, and it made sense to launch with us and also try to cross sell some of these services, right? So
mm,
when they eventually decided that they were going to launch Fix It 45, we were approached with an offer to acquire us, and also exactly as part of their launch
mm,
strategy that, oh, they
yeah.
acquired the company that already provides some of these services, right? So getting
Mm,
those customer base and also getting them to cross sell was going to be a no brainer, was going to be easy, right? So
yeah.
that was the premise for the acquisition.
Okay, okay. I mean, so from what you're telling me, I think the one thing that I get is it's not really just about the tech. You have to be good at business strategy. You have to
Absolutely,
know your market. You
absolutely,
have to know everything about running a
absolutely.
business as
You have
well.
to have
So,
customers. You have to have customers
exactly.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think the thing about having these tech startups that have been acquired is so maybe the one thing that I notice here is everyone who tries to create a product or everyone who's creating a product, I don't think I've seen many people who have that in the back of their head to be like, we could create this product and then we could eventually have it, we could eventually sell it. So they're creating
Exactly.
a product just to have it used by like the people that they've targeted. And as I'm saying, there's not much of a business strategy. There's not much of understanding the environment that you're selling your product to and who's going to
Hmm.
use it, who's going to benefit from it.
Hmm.
So I just want to know, like, when you look at the Nigerian tech ecosystem, like, has this been kind of a trend? Like when tech products were being massively adopted and everything, like all these fintech companies that we see in Nigeria, have people always had this entrepreneurial like strategies in the back of their mind to be like, we can create this, we can eventually sell it. Like, what is our business strategy? How are we going about this? Because um, I was looking at the numbers and it says Nigeria has like over 100 fintech companies. So, but Nigeria is also
Way
big
more,
because
way more
Malawi,
than that.
way more than 100. Okay, then I should have seen an old article. But yeah, but Malawi is not that big of a country, but still, is it
What's the population in Malawi?
so right now we're at about 22 million. But then
Oh,
when it comes to the digital thing, I think we're at about 30% of this population is online. So
mm,
there's kind of a lot of the numbers sometimes they don't balance. Like there's not
yeah.
a lot of people using the
Malawi is
internet.
about 10%. The population is about 10% that of Nigeria.
Mm. I mean,
Yeah,
but I mean, there's still other small countries that are doing big things,
true,
right?
true.
But yeah, so like tech companies in Nigeria, like, are you always going out there with this entrepreneurial mindset to be like, okay, we're gonna create this product, we're gonna sell it, or we're gonna create this product, and this is our product, this is our market,
Hmm.
we're just gonna be
Hmm.
here and do our
Hmm.
thing. Yeah.
So if you look at the evolution of tech, especially in Nigeria, first of all, Nigerians are very enterprising, and once there's a wave, everyone seems to jump on it, right? And we started seeing this wave really catching on. Of course, it started from way before that, which is 2015, but we started seeing a lot of people catching on this, exciting idea of building something and leveraging technology to scale. We saw it catching on really from 2015, 2016, 2017. And then, of course, when we had the acquisition of Paystack, we saw a lot more people start building fintechs and building similar solutions, right? So, looking at the evolution, initially, because we came from a place where we had deficits in terms of raising investment, right? And then the initial people who came into the arena, and
Mm,
I'll mention companies like Jobberman, Iroko, Jumia, Konga,
mm,
Hotels.ng. A lot of these people really paved the way for what
mm,
became a sensation, right? So they went on and they sort of like built a model around fundraising, right? And
yeah.
then they started attracting a lot of investments into the country for the first time. Because I remember way back then, people would raise as little as $50,000, and it's going to be a whole announcement on tech
Mm,
blogs, and everyone was excited, right? But then from
yeah.
2015, 2016, we started seeing a lot more fundraiser. We started seeing things around $1 million. We started seeing that it was
Yeah.
possible for you to raise up to $1 million, $2 million, $3 million,
Mm,
right? And a lot of these companies were doing really well, right? So because we moved from a place of deficit into sort of
mm,
like a place of investment, for lack of better words to use, investment abundance. People felt it made more sense to just raise money and try to build a sustainable company, as opposed to trying to build a company from scratch and trying to get acquired, because these two
mm,
are different kind of strategies, if you understand what I'm saying,
yeah.
right? Yeah, so we went from that place, and then people, so we didn't have, early on, we didn't have a lot of acquisitions. If you got acquired, it was because you had something really essential and the offer was really good, right? Like
Mm,
Paystack. Paystack.
yeah.
Paystack was one of the first acquisitions we had for a fintech that was doing really good numbers, right? But they got acquired by a
Mm,
much bigger company, Stripe,
mm,
and people saw that, wow, so it is possible to build something that people really want and eventually
yeah.
get acquired by a much bigger company that has interest in your space, right? And so
Yeah.
that sort of like ushered, this whole idea of, wow, I can actually build to get acquired as a strategy. And now
Mm,
we see a lot of acquisitions happening, not just in Nigeria but even across the continent. We see a lot of acquisitions happening. Like, for example, people trying to expand into new markets, they would use acquisition as a way
yeah.
to expand into that market. Exactly. So now
Mm,
people are beginning to wake up to the idea that, oh, part of my exit strategy to actually build something is to actually get acquired, right?
yeah.
So I don't have to wait till I raise money and IPO and list on the stock exchange. I don't have to
Yeah.
do that. I can just look at the value chain of a particular
Mm,
vertical and say that, oh, I'm going to build something really, really valuable in that entire chain, and hope that a player or a competitor or a much bigger company will eventually see that and want to acquire that piece that we have. And
yeah.
that was exactly what it was in my case, because I knew that
Mm,
anything vehicles is very difficult. It's a very fragmented market, because you have like the auto parts market, you have repairs, you have the service, you
yeah.
have the technicians.
Mm,
It's very, very fragmented. And to be very honest with you, I was faced with the decision of, do I want to go and build something that touches across the entire value chain? That's almost impossible to do, if I'm being
yeah.
frank with myself. it's probably doable, but it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of
Resources,
money.
yeah.
It's going to take a lot of work, right? So I just told myself that, you know what, start from the low hanging fruit, which is vehicle detailing. It's easy to launch. It's not so
Mm,
difficult, right? And make sure you do it very well so it becomes as attractive
mm,
enough for someone who has the money, has the resource, has the experience to come acquire it and build together, right? And that was exactly what happened. So for me, that was my strategy, and I worked towards that, and eventually it happened. So it wasn't a surprise that we got acquired. I was working towards
yeah.
it anyways, right? So the
Okay.
idea is that people
Mm,
are beginning to wake up to the idea that you can actually disrupt in a small way, right? So look for
mm,
a part of a very big chain and disrupt there, and eventually someone who is interested in what you have done can actually,
mm.
pick interest and get acquired.
Okay. So I think one of the other interesting things that I've seen is some of the unicorns that have come out of Nigeria. I think I'll give an example of Flutterwave, which I saw that I think sometime back, I think last year, if not 2023, they got a license from the Reserve Bank of Malawi. I really
Oh
haven't
wow,
seen,
interesting.
yeah, like, but I really haven't seen a lot of Flutterwave in the
Activity.
fintech space
Yeah.
here in Malawi. But like, are are people creating their products thinking of not only Nigerians, but thinking of if this is big enough, it can also be used in other countries? And I don't know, like kind of like what is exactly the game plan? Because if we talk about scaling, that means you're thinking of if I'm creating the product, it's not something that's just going to work in my neighborhood. At least it has to be big enough to be adopted by the entire country. Yeah, something like that. So like are people
Hmm.
creating with the
Hmm.
idea of we are
Hmm.
creating solutions that can serve
Hmm.
Africa or something that we can sell even on a global scale?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So something a lot of people don't talk about is the fact that, the idea that the internet penetration across Africa is still very low. It's a challenge, right? And that is why, just like you mentioned, in Malawi, for example, it's not even more than 30%, right? So if I was a Malawian building in Malawi, I have to think
Mm.
about Africa as a market as opposed to just Malawi as a market, because
Malawi, yeah.
how big can that market in Malawi be? And same applies to
Mm.
Nigeria and other African countries, right?
Mm.
Because the of course access to mobile devices, access to internet, because again the infrastructure for a lot of these tech products that we build is heavily reliant on having access to these things, right? So it's a
Mm.
very big factor, and that is why in a lot of countries, like for example in Tunisia, a lot of transactions are still done in cash. You go everywhere and cash transactions are huge. No fintechs, no, you have to pay in
Nothing.
cash. Yeah, you pay in cash.
That's
Exactly. So
Malawi.
exactly. So
Yeah.
because these transactions are not captured in
Mm.
a very big way, it doesn't reflect into transactions for these products. Right. So you have to think
Mm.
about how can I, get a percentage of all these transactions across different markets so that it all adds up in the end, and I can have something valuable to look at and say, oh, okay, transactions make sense, right? So that is the
Yeah.
case, and that is why people look at scaling, because when you are
Mm.
scaling, you have to look at, okay, what markets make sense, what markets have like at least good penetration in terms of like mobile devices, internet, and all, right. And it's a small percentage across different markets in Africa, right? So you have to think intercontinental. You have to think about how do I go across the continent, capturing the little percentages we have across these different markets, so that it adds up in the end. Number two, it's also a way to de-risk, because don't forget, you are just one legislation away from ending your business, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
central bank of any country can wake up tomorrow and say, as far as we're concerned, we no longer want XYZ kind of service, and that is the end, right? So
Mm.
away from scaling, and of course looking at it from an angle of transactions and revenue and all of that, people also look at scaling as a way to de-risk, so that if
Mm.
anything happens in Nigeria, for example, we still have operations in Ghana and we still have
Yeah.
revenue coming from that market. We still have operations in Kenya and we still have revenue. So the company doesn't die abruptly, right? So that is
Yeah.
what people look
Yeah.
at, right? And then a second thing that people now also consider is away from Africa, and it's also because of the other things I mentioned, right? Like access to internet, access to mobile devices,
Mm.
and all of these things, right? People now also consider scaling outside of the continent because a lot of countries can even afford these services.
Yeah.
They can afford to use them. There's access to these services, right? So yes, scaling within and across Africa is one thing, but also scaling outside Africa is also another thing people are now beginning to consider, right? Because there are a
Yeah.
lot of factors that come into play.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I like that you've said is scaling outside of Africa. Because if I'm not mistaken, I saw of a carpooling service, a Nigerian one, that acquired another carpooling service in, is it South America or Mexico or something,
Oh
somewhere
wow.
there, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
Oh
they
yes,
actually,
that
yeah.
should be a move Africa.
Mm.
Yes,
So
move.
yeah,
Yeah,
so I mean, I guess thinking of markets even outside Africa is
absolutely,
something that we're.
absolutely. Another thing I forgot to mention is
Oh,
also purchasing power, because purchasing power also plays a role, right? I don't want to go deep into that, but yeah, you understand what I'm trying to say, right? The purchasing power, I mean, how many people can really afford some of these services because of the state of things in some of our countries, right?
yeah,
And then there's the general belief that people outside the continent, at least standard of living is a bit higher, purchasing power is a bit higher, and
yeah.
affordability is not really a problem. So you get more people that are able and willing to also patronize your
Afford your
services.
service, yes. And also, like when you were explaining at the beginning, the other thing you said like was a central bank could decide to, I don't know, change up
That's
some
for
rules, change up
fintechs. Yes,
some
yes.
regulations, and then this affects your business. So I just wanted to know, like when it comes to Nigerian startups, how exactly are they kind of leveraging alternative financing, like using crypto when it comes to maybe navigating the central bank issues? Like,
Hmm.
are there any companies that are kind of considering crypto to be like, okay, at least this is a safer option when it comes to, I don't know, like managing
Hmm.
to kind of curb the
Hmm.
central bank regulation changes.
Hmm. Hmm. So the good thing about our central bank here is that they engage, right? And our fintech players and other people across the sector are able to engage the central bank. And to be very honest with you, um, we have a reputation. Our central bank has a reputation of being one of the most inclusive and willing to engage central bank, right? And that is why it's almost very easy to launch a fintech here, apart from, of course, the
Yeah,
cost of acquiring licenses and the wait time, right? But you can at least see that there's that willingness to support and engage, right? But the particular use case, like you mentioned, crypto, is when you're referring to cross-border payments, right? Because for some reason, um, our central bank and regulatory bodies have halted the use of our own local platforms and cards to make. Before that wasn't the case. Before you could use a
mm,
Nigerian issued card to make payments for goods and services in a place like China. If you're trying to import things, you could use our card before. But now that is no longer the case, right? And that is where a lot of people are now beginning to leverage, like you mentioned, crypto. They're leveraging
yeah,
crypto for to enable people, stable coins, to enable people facilitate these cross-border payments. So
yeah,
now I can approach a fintech that, quote unquote, offers cross-border payments. But behind the scene, what's really powering that are stable coins. People are really using stable coins for these transactions, and that is where we see a
mm,
lot of those use cases. But for our own local transactions, we don't have to change. We don't have to change the way it's currently being done because there's that support. People can
Mm.
literally launch today, and there's support from the central bank. There's adoption. People are easily able to adopt. Nigeria has high adoption in terms of digital products, right? So there's adoption. People will use it, right? So like, but
Yeah.
where you would see people reinventing the wheel, so to say, is when you're
Yeah.
referring to like cross-border payments and the likes.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So I'm just gonna give it to the audience. Like, if anyone has a question, to please post it in the comments. And to please not spam the comments as well. If you have anything to say, don't put many comments all at once. Better write a post or two so that you keep everyone else engaged. So, okay. Let me give it over to you. Do you have any question for me, or maybe even anyone in the comments to say when you want to know about like the tech landscape in Malawi, or because I see some of the people who have joined have their own products that they're creating. So just a question for anyone specifically when it
Hmm.
comes to the tech
Hmm.
landscape in Malawi.
Yeah, I'm curious to know. I'm curious to know um, what's the popular vertical that people like. For example, if you come to Nigeria, the most popular vertical is fintech, right? People seem to there. I mean, we have 9 unicorns, and just one of them is not a fintech, and that's Andela. The other
Hmm.
8 unicorns are all fintechs
Hmm.
in Nigeria, right? So, what's the
Yeah.
one popular vertical that you would say people seem to be building in Malawi?
Okay. I see a good friend of mine, Innocentia, in the comments. I'm gonna give that to her, because when it comes to kind of tell us what the popular vertical is when it comes to the Malawian tech landscape, or anyone else in the comments who can comment. But when it comes to the fintech space, we're still kind of developing there. There's only one company that I see that is actually making proper like headway and progress when it comes to payments and online transactions for services. So when it comes to products that are actually being adopted, I would say maybe fintech, because it's just that one that I know. There is also another product or platform that I know, but it's a music streaming app where Malawian artists get to sign up and yeah, get paid and everything, that is also working on scaling outside of Malawi. So I would say those two, but if anyone else in the comments could just add
Yeah.
any other, yeah. But the one thing that you said that I saw as a challenge was the infrastructure part. So every country, yes, has an infrastructure gap, because I was looking at Nigeria and seeing like even the population, it's a very large country, and that you also have like literacy challenges, you have inclusion challenges, which are also the challenges that we have as Malawi. But the one thing that I see is that is different is that Nigeria is actually, as you said, thinking outside of Nigeria. Like we're creating solutions that can not only serve Nigeria but can serve other
Absolutely.
markets, and having these different sources of revenue. So someone just commented and said there's also Ulinzinga. This is like a Malawian. It's a Malawian term. So I think Ulinzinga is actually also by what do you call them? Payjangu. I think it's a Payjangu product. Just if people in the comments could confirm, which is the fintech that I was talking about. And yeah, my friend
Hmm.
Innocentia also says fintech is the one that is gaining popularity in Malawi at the moment. So we would say that's the vertical.
Interesting. And then
Yeah.
for talents, right? Because early on in our ecosystem, getting
Mm,
talents was really a very big challenge, right? You would see people
mm,
go to places like India to go and build products. Do you face
mm,
similar challenges today? It's no longer the case today in Nigeria because a lot of people
mm,
stepped up, and a lot of engineers were being trained. We had all these many programs for like Andela. People like Andela came in, and then a lot of
mm,
engineers, developers. Do you face those challenges today? Because I want to believe that Malawi is still like very early on in its ecosystem. Yeah. So
Yeah.
do you face those challenges today?
So I would personally say that from the private products that we see, most of them are developed locally. People are leveraging local talent. But when it comes to products that are made for like public service, I think most of the talent for that is actually imported. Like we're getting talent from elsewhere. So yeah, again, I have my friends in the comments who are in the tech space and they know a lot of this stuff. But the products, the fintech products that I was talking about, these are actually by Malawian talent.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I just okay now that I mentioned the public service, I just wanted to know, like when it comes to the ecosystem and everything, apart from the fact that you said that your central bank is kind of better at helping fintech companies grow and everything, like what other kind of regulations or I don't know incentives are they kind of making to help the tech space in Nigeria grow and to get to where it is? Like, are you getting enough support from government agencies, regulators, policymakers, and the like?
The support we have in Nigeria for the ecosystem, unfortunately, is not really from the government, right? It's private sector driven. And when I even say private sector, I'm referring to individuals who have now become sort of like institutions, right? And just like I mentioned early on, we had these founders that recorded some success. And then those founders took it upon themselves to become enablers of the ecosystem, right? So they set up local funds. They would
Mm,
they would they would sit as an intermediary between international investors and local founders. They would refer people. They would support founders.
mm,
They would play the role of angels, right? So all of these
mm,
things cumulatively came together and made the Nigerian tech ecosystem self-reliant in some way, right?
okay.
Because
Mm,
founders that have exited, founders that are now earning well, engineers that are earning well will come together,
mm,
they will form syndicates and start investing in local founders. Because the thing about investment is that before you can attract international investors, you have to show some traction. You have to
yeah.
show that
Mm,
what you're building is something that people really want, right? And
mm,
to be honest, you need a lot of support from day one. You need support to build, you need financial support. So this is something that locally we've been able to crack,
mm,
right? This is something that Nigeria has as an advantage. So if I'm building today, if I'm, let's say for example, I want to launch a startup, there are a couple of people that are friends that can become angels from day one. I don't need to
mm,
look for an international investor. My own
mm,
friends and colleagues in Nigeria today, because they understand the landscape, they understand the risk, and they understand the rewards. If
yeah.
it eventually succeeds, they are more than willing to support. Right. So
Mm,
we have and this is the same in the Western community. So we have an ecosystem that has evolved and has now become self-reliant. This was not done with the support of the government, right? This was done with
okay.
the support of
Mm,
individuals that took it upon themselves, and then these
mm,
individuals understand exactly. So that is one of the advantage that we have in Nigeria, right?
mm,
Supporting each other, and eventually when the investors, foreign investors come in, they see that, oh wow, there's some progress, and they're more than
yeah.
happy to jump. They're more than happy to jump on it to support.
Mm,
And all right. So just for example, we have. If you ask me to name some of the venture capital firms, local ones that we have in Nigeria, we have a lot.
mm,
We have Future Africa, we have Ventures Platform, we have Ingressive, we have Voltron
mm,
Capital. Like there are a lot of local VC firms that have taken it upon themselves to support, right? Before you even
yeah.
start talking about, yes, exactly. And because these people have skin in the game, when investors come in, they want to, because investors don't want to come in all alone. They want to
Yeah.
be sure that there are local players that are willing to take the risk. And then it makes it easier for them to just take the risk alongside you because they feel that
Mm.
okay, you have local context, you have local knowledge, you know what to look out for. They don't know. They are looking for someone to guide them, right? So
Yeah.
they're always happy to have a matching fund. Let's say you are giving if a local investor is investing 500K, they are more than happy to match the fund and also invest an additional 500K, and then it makes
Yeah.
it easy for people to say, "Oh, we raised the million, proceed," and all of that, right? So
Yeah. Mm.
it's really private individuals as opposed to government.
As opposed to government. Okay, that's actually something that I didn't really know, but it's good to know that the private sector really has an interest to kind of grow the products that are being developed now. So the other thing that I've noticed, or not that I've noticed, this is actually a fact. Like lately, I've been seeing posts going around like there is a funding gap when it comes to tech startups or just startups in general and MSMEs, which MSMEs are what drive Africa's economy. So I just wanted to know exactly how Nigerian startups are kind of navigating through that, kind of finding the opportunities in, I don't know, working with MSMEs and how they're helping, or is there really kind of is this posing a challenge to the, because
Yeah, it is.
most
Mm-hmm.
funding is going to tech startups as
Startups.
compared to
Yes, yes, absolutely.
MSMEs. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So just like I mentioned, right, the reason startups are thriving is because individuals stood up and decided to, of course, rise to the occasion and support the ecosystem. For
mm,
SMEs, the problem is that the pathway to get your return on investment is not defined.
mm,
Startups, it's almost predictable, right? I mean, if you invest in 10 startups, at least you know that two that eventually go and succeed can give you
mm,
all the returns on all your other because of the way it's programmed to work, right? It's highly
yeah,
scalable. It's highly scalable. You move fast. You get your returns back and all of that. It's predictable. It's predictable. For
yeah,
SMEs, the way they are programmed is a bit different, right? And that is why it's more long term, right? I mean, someone would give the example of a camel, right? SMEs move like camels. They grow slowly, they scale slowly, they take their time, right? And
yeah,
that is not what tech investors are looking for, right? So
yeah,
just like we had people rise to the occasion, unfortunately for SMEs, we're supposed to have a lot of support from the government and financial institutions like
yeah,
banks, that are able to offer loans to these SMEs and offer some form of grants and all of that. But we don't
yeah,
have that today, and because startups did not rely on banks and your government institutions and all of that, they were able to thrive. So if we can have individuals, but again, like I mentioned, the ROI for these individuals to want to step up is not attractive enough, and that is why it's on the banks. Yeah, to be
yeah,
honest, very frank, exactly, and that is why
yeah,
it's on the banks and it's on the government to ensure that they keep having this infrastructure in place. They keep
mm,
having this support. They keep having this access to grants and capital to support the SMEs, right? Because of
yeah.
the way it's designed. Exactly.
Okay, so I mean that's interesting that you say that, because the one thing that I've seen, or one of the Nigerian startups that's being talked about, is it Money Point or is it Money Point?
It's money points.
Yes, Money
It's money
Point.
point. Yeah.
So I see that they're a microfinance. Is it a fin? It's a microfinance
It's a
startup. It's
fintech.
a
It's a fintech.
microfinance fintech that is actually leveraging the SMEs to, I don't know, this is like their business model. They're working with SMEs and
To
stuff.
receive payments, yes. So
Mm,
what money point does is, how I mentioned that adoption for financial products in Nigeria is on the rise. A
yeah,
lot of people are now beginning to, of course, like a lot of people have accounts, a lot of people have cards, right? And
Mm.
because a lot of people we do more of mobile bank transfers as opposed to mobile money, like you would see in Kenya, M-Pesa and the likes is
Yeah.
different in Nigeria. We use more of like digital banking apps here. And
Okay.
because that demand is on the rise, if I go to, I can't, to be honest, I don't hold cash in Nigeria anymore. I can't remember the last time I walked into a grocery store and I took out my wallet and, took out some cash. No, I'm always,
Yeah.
either it's my card or it's a transfer, right? And then when you have
Mm.
that as the case, it's now on these vendors to be sure that they have what it takes to receive this payment. And that is a void that Money Point quickly went to solve, right? So two things
Mm.
are in place. Two things are in place. The first one is the ability to be able to receive payments, because payments through simple bank transfers are way higher than cards.
Mm.
But the problem with bank transfers is that some of them have delays before it's confirmed. Whereas with
Mm.
cards, once you swipe your card, you can easily, you know whether it was approved or declined right on the spot. But
Yeah.
sometimes with the bank transfers, it takes time. It could take some
Mm.
minutes, it could take some hours before you could confirm it. But MoneyPoint came and solved that problem. Now,
Yeah.
MoneyPoint provided the point of sale terminals, the POS machines,
Mm-hmm.
that can receive transfers and give you an instantaneous feedback on if it was successful or not.
Mm.
So I don't need to swipe my card. I just send money to that POS terminal that has a designated bank account, and you
Yeah.
receive it instantaneously, and you can even
Instantly.
print.
Mm.
Yeah, and you can even print the payment receipt for me, right? So
Yeah.
that was a game changer, and that was why adoption was very high, because a lot of these vendors, they can receive their payments immediately. um, the ease for making payment was also there, right?
Yeah.
And then if you go to the marketplaces, everybody has a POS terminal, because
Yeah.
paying with bank transfer is very popular here, as opposed to like mobile money, M-Pesa and the likes. We do more. So it
Mm.
made a lot of sense for these vendors to want to use MoneyPoint and all, right? So MoneyPoint just came in and disrupted that entire ecosystem, and it was a very massive game changer for everybody in that value chain.
Okay, okay. So speaking of payments and stuff, I just wanted to know
Why does
also.
it look like I was advertising for money? I hope the scene is that.
And pay
It looks
you.
like I was, yeah, it looks like I was advertising for them just now. Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, speaking about payments, I really just wanted to know if like these international big companies such as Visa have had kind of a role to play when it comes to fintech adoption and scaling of fintech companies in Nigeria, or I don't know, in Africa, if you know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They have, right? Likes
Mm.
of Visa, Mastercard. They've played a very big role, especially in helping drive adoption for cards, right?
Mm.
A lot of these banks, it became very easy for them to issue cards to customers, right? And that ushered in a lot of, a big shift in the
Yeah.
way transactions are being carried out, because it became very affordable to
Mm.
get a card, like with less than $1, right? As
Mm.
little as 90 cents, I can get a card. Less than $1, I can get a card, and I can use that card to make transactions anywhere in Nigeria, right?
Mm.
So they came in and they made adoption for cards very easy, right, for everybody. And of course, that helped usher in a new wave of how people transact, right? And then away from that, they also support, so they have these accelerator programs where they're accelerating people that are building and disrupting financial services, not just in Nigeria, but even on the continent.
Yeah.
Visa has the Visa Accelerator, MasterCard also has theirs. where they give a lot of grants and they encourage people to come on board and build financial services, right? But on top of all of these things, they also provide a lot of rails, payment rails that we don't get to see,
Mm,
behind the scene, providing infrastructure for all these financial products to thrive. So people leverage this infrastructure that they provide and they just build on top of it. And then they're able
mm.
to quickly offer financial products. So yes, they definitely played a major role.
Okay, okay. So I think I've run out of questions. I've run out of questions, and I think we're getting close to time. But I think the last thing I'll just ask you is, when you look at the African digital ecosystem and how people are creating tech products and innovations, what's the one thing you're very excited about when it comes to the tech landscape in 2025?
I think something I'm really excited about is the culture, right? I
Mm,
mean, away from the products, it seems like people across the ecosystem, regardless of the country, we all speak one language, we all act
mm,
alike, we all have the same expectations. Like when I go to Kenya, it doesn't feel like when I go to Kenya or when I go to any other country and I interact with people within the tech ecosystem, it all feels like we all had the same orientation. It feels like we had the same training. So
yeah,
the way that energy, that enthusiasm, the culture, and everything that is related to building in tech, the way it has been able to spread across the world is something that really needs
mm,
to be studied, right? Because the culture, regardless of where you are, is similar. I mean, when I go and I interact with people, no matter the country I'm in, as long as they are in the tech ecosystem, I feel so alive and I enjoy those conversations, right? The
yeah,
energy is really exciting. Like everything works, right? Everything in terms of relationship, in terms of everything, it just makes sense, right? So that's
yeah,
something, and that's why I always look forward to, going to any country and connecting with people within the tech ecosystem because you're always welcomed. You're always, I mean, I don't know how it happened, but that's just the case. And that's something I really find very
yeah,
exciting. I don't know how they did it. Tech seems to be the only industry that has that going for it. Um, the music entertainment industry is not the same. The oil and
mm,
gas, of course not. The banking, of course not. Right? But if you go anywhere, if you come to Nigeria, if you go to Ghana, and you interact with people within the ecosystem, it's
yeah,
always the same. It's always the same. So that's something I really appreciate. And then away from that, I think the other thing would be that right now, I like how people are beginning to consider scaling and building products for the continent as opposed to way back when people will be thinking about. Of course, there are nuances. Don't get it don't get it mixed up. There are
yeah,
nuances. If you build a product, the way you launch and scale across different markets will come with the nuance, right? That
mm,
is related to that market. Exactly. It comes with the context. So there are nuances around it, right? But the
yeah,
fact that people are beginning to realize that if we're building, we have to build for scalability. We have to build, as opposed to just thinking about your market. It's something
yeah,
that is now also very exciting.
yeah. All right. Okay. Thank you. So I'm just going to give it over to the audience now. If anyone has a question, to just pop it in the comments, and I'll put it on the screen, and I'll ask Gerald.
So
So
while we're waiting on the audience,
yeah,
I have a question for you. So let's say I'm to come visit Malawi,
Malawi.
right? And I want to do an ecosystem documentary about Malawi because my documentary I have a couple of pillars that we like to touch.
Mm,
We like to visit tech hubs. We like to
yeah.
visit any government bodies that interfaces with the tech community. We like to
Mm,
visit founders. We like to
mm.
visit digital nomads that are not from Malawi but are building from Malawi,
From Malawi.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we like. So, would you say that Malawi currently has these different touch points that would make up for a very solid documentary that people would like to watch?
At the moment, I think we do have we have the hubs. We do have hubs. I'm not sure on the digital nomads. I'm not sure about that, but we do have hubs. We have government departments that are working to kind of do our digital development because we have a digital development strategy. So we are working on building our digital public infrastructure. We have e-government and stuff like that. So when it comes to government, I think there would be some stuff there. When it comes to hubs, I'm sure there's some stuff because we do have innovation hubs like in the capital city, and we have the startups like the fintech startups even in the capital city that
Do you host
could
mixers?
be.
Do you have a lot of mixers where people come together and just talk about tech, have panel sessions, and have a great time?
Not much, I'll be honest with you. I know of one. I know of one, or maybe someone in the comments could put, but I know of one kind of like a mixer conference thing, but it's for developers. I did join sometime last year. It's called Hello World. I joined last year, but it's for developers. But I think it's kind of a good building block to be like, okay, next
Absolutely.
time we could diversify and not just keep this strictly for developers. But
Exactly.
yeah, we do. I mean, I love this session because I think it's opening people's minds up to like, hey, we could do this, we could do that, and it's actually something. Because every time I see the mixers and stuff, like when people in Kenya, in South Africa, it looks fun. And you told me
Yes.
about was it Jitex in Nigeria? I did take a look. Um, yeah, it looks like it's something
Yeah.
that's really good,
It's
like
the
even
first.
for the
It's the first
ecosystem.
time. It's the first time it's going to be happening.
Mm,
Jitex is the first time it's coming to Nigeria. But outside of Jitex, we do have a lot of events. We had one just
mm,
yesterday, last week.
yeah.
We've had a lot of we have conferences, we have mixers, and that is, I forgot to mention, that is also something that was very responsible for developing our ecosystem, because we get to
Okay.
meet a lot, and these things are
Mm,
hosted by individuals, right? So
mm,
individuals, I mean, I could have my living room, buy some drinks and just say, hey guys, come around, let's talk about tech, right? And
yeah.
people, yeah, and people become excited about it. People are challenged
Uh,
to go and build
yeah.
something. So I mean, maybe you can drive things like that in Malawi. Start from your
Yeah.
living room.
I need to start looking into it.
Yeah, buy a few board games, buy a few board
Yeah.
games. You never know
Uh,
where it could evolve into
way
becoming
to
something
go.
way massive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So again, if anyone has some questions, just put them in the comments. But just to read some of the comments that I had before you came in, because I asked like, what do you think when we talk about African digital ecosystems? And then I got a response that said, let me just pop it on the screen. It's a
Okay.
rapidly evolving mobile driven economy, which is basically fueled by fintechs, innovation, and maybe a growing tech savvy population. And I had another comment from Lillian Gender who said, excited to be here and learn a couple of things. We have a startup company, hence would appreciate the knowledge shared. Thanks for this event.
And please, if you're watching, let's connect on LinkedIn, Instagram, same name everywhere, Gerald Black. You'll find me Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. I always like to connect with people across different ecosystem, because that way I get to see what's happening when you share, when you post,
Mm,
and then you can also see what's happening on my end. So feel free to connect.
yeah. So I got this comment that said, I love how he pointed out about the development of the ecosystem. Tech innovators supporting each other is something Malawi should do, which is something that I totally, totally agree on because it's something that we haven't seen and it's possibly one of the
Hmm.
things that is holding us back.
Hmm.
So we need we need to support each other more when it comes to tech to kind of create solutions that we can scale and sell
Hmm.
to other, yeah, like the continent or even globally.
Hmm.
So yeah, no questions so far, but we have gone past our time, our 1 hour slot. So thank you so much, Gerald, for doing this. I
Thanks
know
for
it
having me.
was
This was fun. This
yes,
was fun. Yeah.
yes, it was also fun for me. And thank you so much even for responding to my email and
No,
having the call with
absolutely.
me. exactly. You told me about GITEX, which is something that I'm really interested to look into, and
Okay.
hopefully I can come, hopefully. So thank you so much for this session. It's been very informative. We're going to be following on your content. I loved the Tunisia trailer. Hopefully I get to watch the entire documentary
Yeah,
and
you will
everything
love
else that you're working on.
you will love the main documentary. Definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm happy to see other things that you're working on. I'm gonna encourage everyone to follow you on your social media so they get to see everything else that you're working on. So thank you again for joining, and
Thank
thank
you so
you so
much.
much
Thanks for
for
having me.
everyone that watched. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.